You like that, don't you, bitch? When I first learned about the history of Ptolemy's spheres in junior high, I thought it was one of the saddest things I'd ever heard, in science class anyway. What a little slut you are. Claudius Ptolemaeus was an astronomer, a mathematician, an all-around talented guy in Hellenistic Egypt. In his book, Almagest, he put forward a gorgeously Baroque planetary system that explained and could predict with admirable success the movements of the heavenly bodies. He envisioned an intricate system of orbits and counter-orbits, each with a mysterious name like epicycle, equant, or eccentric deferent. Planets spinning in a complex but achingly precise dance around the Earth, the center of the universe. It is a beautiful theory, brilliantly realized. It is also, of course, dead wrong. How desperate we must have been. He must have been, I thought. An old man peering up at the stars for something he has missed, adding circle after senseless circle to his cluttered pages. Another orbit, another layer, anything to make the numbers come out right, to prove the centrality of the Earth and mankind, the only possibility he could conceive. This is what you want, isn't it? I see it differently now. Ptolemy's certainty was a gift, not a curse. There were things he simply knew. He believed, for instance, that in what Plato called the spindle of necessity, literally the spindle purported to run through the center of the Earth. It is said to have been created by Ananke, goddess of necessity, also of compulsion and inevitability. Ptolemy knew the spindle of necessity existed, and that the Earth spun around it. In his mind, all he had to do was discover its workings. To him, the rotation of the planets was basically the world's greatest Sudoku puzzle. If he kept drawing those circles, eventually he'd figure out why a phenomenon he already knew to be true was true. And the thing is, he managed to do it. What comfort, what pride he must have taken in that. Say it. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. It only matters how blissfully certain you are. It's when the certainty falls apart that the dread sets in. Yes, please. Do it again. The first time Dee slapped me, I flinched. He didn't apologize. Instead, he gave me a conspiratorial smile and slapped me again, hard across the face. I gasped, but in truth, I didn't hurt much. Not, I realized with a small prick of surprise, quite enough. I giggled nervously when he slapped me again and again. What I noticed was this. As my cheek burned hotter and hotter, I began to feel more and more deliriously free. So this is it, I remember thinking. This is much better. The next day, my jaw ached. It wasn't the only ache I had, but it was the one I found most enthralling. Alone in the bathroom, I cradled my cheek in my palm and made exaggerated chewing motions, smiling dreamily as I felt the grinding click at the hinge of my jawbone. No one had ever treated me like this before, yet it felt astonishingly natural, as if I were finally home. So, okay, this relationship with Dee goes on, and it destroys my marriage for a while, and it's a whole big thing. Skip to the end. The only relief I got from this feeling of rudderless panic was when Dee was fucking me, or taking me, to speak more precisely. Because as Dee became more distant outside the bedroom, our sex grew steadily rougher. Dee was a perceptive lover, perceptive enough to know, before I did, that I wanted him to hit me, control me, hurt me. He saw how delighted I was with the first dark bruise on my ass, how I peered at myself in the mirror. He could not give me what I wanted, couldn't make himself need me or allow me into his orbit, but he could place his hand around my throat like a pearl choker, apply a slap to my cheek like an expensive rouge. It was not his anger or his sadism, it was his gift, the only one he was capable of bestowing. I don't think Dee understood that these gifts made me feel alive and owned and marked, and thus, briefly, wanted. When my husband Eric and I had tried our fleece cuffs and paddles, it had felt as if we were children playing a game in a padded nursery. Safe. Too safe. With Dee, it was utterly different. When he was holding me down, yanking my hair, calling me names, making me crawl, he was taking something from me, which must mean he needed something. And if he needed something, my world seemed not so senseless. This was my last wild theory, the final eccentric deferent I tried. Except that Dee began withholding his brutality, perhaps unnerved by what he'd unleashed, perhaps simply bored. The less aggressive he grew, the more I was sure that our violent moments, the only ones in which I felt peace, held the secret to my restored universe. It was a crackpot theory, building the mechanics of my existence on the joys of getting slapped around. But when the logic you cling to begins to fall apart and desperation sets in, you'll do all kinds of things to make the math come out right. I took to begging for sex, conniving for it. I made fancy duck dinners, planned trips I couldn't afford, bought $75 pairs of men's underwear. The last time we had sex was in an $800 room at the W Hotel. The sheets were lovely, but he arrived late, fucked me almost perfunctorily, and hit me only once. I love it how we're all so sad for each other. It happened after we drifted off to sleep. I bobbed up toward consciousness at some pre-dawn hour, felt the pull of him, and curled up against his chest. Still asleep, he flung out an arm to push me away, his forearm whacking me hard across the cheekbone. I spent the rest of the night crying on the fancy tiles of the bathroom floor. It wasn't until 3 torturous months later that we finally broke up for good, but that blow across my cheek was the beginning of the end of my untenably complex and confused decentric theory of the universe. It wasn't a matter of my finally smartening up. Ptolemy had all the brains in the world. It's simply that eventually a person discovers that there's a limit to how many hard truths and contradictions her heart can accept. Dee never hit me in anger. The first time I saw him angry was when I met him to plead one last time. Please love me, or fuck me, or at least talk to me. Please forgive me, though I don't know what for. Please give me my center back. The sight of me disgusted him. He dismissed me with cold finality in the middle of Union Square on a day in late November, then went on to the Whole Foods to pick up his sushi lunch. The only shred of dignity I managed to retain was in not dropping to the ground in a pile of broken bits right in front of him. And I managed to wait until I walked around the corner to the garden with Gandhi's statue, where I sobbed, gasping, there on the sidewalk. I gathered them up, the bits, but they didn't fit together. I couldn't see how they ever had.